All right, everybody, let's kick this one off. This one's going to be probably going to be a rough draft of an audio version of the so far 7 basic principles to exercise. These are common principles that everyone can use to mitigate the variables of training, the variables of exercise. These are common concepts. This is something that everybody can adapt to. These are not principles that make a perfect program. However, the adjustments that you make yourself, right? This is not something that is objective, even though they are truths, but they are subjective truths as the individual, being you or me, change the variables of each principle. So to say them right off the bat, I'm going to run through the 7 principles. First one is volume. Volume equals reps and sets. And in a minute, I'm going to go through the basic definition of each. So we have volume, which consists of your reps and sets throughout the exercise, throughout the workout, throughout your single day workout. We have the intensity of your exercise, one specific movement pattern, one specific exercise, not your full day's worth of exercising, but one specific movement pattern. The intensity at which that you move the weight or move your body. Also within that is considered like the percentage, right? The percentage max of how much effort you're giving in a given movement. So we have volume, which is the number of reps and sets. We have intensity, which is the percentage of effort that you give within a given movement pattern. We have tempo. Tempo is the amount of time that you are spending in the eccentric and concentric portions of the movement. That is the movement, right? Because every movement has not an up and a down variable, but a positive and negative, whether it be pushing or pulling, whether it be pressing or, right? There's always 2 parts of a lift. You're either going to lift it and then put it back down, you're going to press it and then bring it back down. There's always 2 parts to a lift, right? If you're squatting, you're going to go down and then up. If you're deadlifting, you're going to go up and then down. If you're bench pressing, you're going to push and then drop it back down. You're going to drop it to your chest and then push it back up. More in depth, with much more in-depth movements, the tempo simply means the time at which it takes you to do a single repetition, right? So you have volume, intensity, tempo. Tempo, another name for tempo is also time under tension, right? We have frequency, which is the amount of time that you spend on a given muscle or group of said muscles throughout a given week. So another word for frequency is consistency, right? How often are you doing it on a daily routine or a weekly routine? I'm missing one. I'm actually missing 3, but I have the other 2 in my head. Volume, intensity, frequency, time under tension. Dang it, I'm missing one. We have range of motion, which isn't necessarily numerical value, which isn't like percentage or counting things, but the obvious range at which you are allowing your muscle to move in a given movement pattern. So the more or less range of motion that you give. I'm only laughing because I said I was going to go into each one later on, but I'm kind of just going into them as I'm saying them, right? Range of motion. One of the spectrum of range of motion is less range of motion. So if you're using little range of motion, then you have the potentiality of focusing on a specific muscle. So no range of motion is what we call, hang on, my definitions are a little bit off here. That would be static training. Static is where your body doesn't move at all. So a plank position is a static hold for your more or less core, right? Static hold is just not moving your body at all, or at least tensing a muscle, but not actually doing anything with a range of motion. This develops muscle as well, but obviously the more range of motion you put a muscle through, the more it's going to, the more fuller the muscle will be developed. However, the more range of motion you have, the more close you get to putting your joints at risk. Sorry, I thought this was a deer. Putting your joints at risk for quote-unquote injury. So the more range of motion you have, the more risk you have at, and I want to use the word injure your joints more, because technically if you're doing things precisely or over time, your joints, tendons, ligaments can get stronger, can gain strength and range of motion over time. But if you go straight into it, then you are risking that of an injury. Let me pause for a second and get back to you on the last two. Right on. So another one. It's different only because it's not necessarily a part of the actual exercise itself, but rest intervals. This is the amount of time you take out in between exercises, in between sets, in between whenever you're not doing something. This is what's going to allow your body to recover from said movement pattern. And all these variables, like I said, work in unison but work independently as well. So you can change each variable independently, one variable at a time, in order to make changes, in order to make growth. But you can also change them all to maximize growth, right? And finally, the last parameter is complexity, right? So the more complex the movement is, and when I mean complex, the opposite of this would be isolated exercises. So a bicep curl isolates the bicep, right, in just moving the biceps, or more or less just focusing on the bicep head. A complex movement would be, the first thing that comes to mind in my head are like Turkish get-ups, right? And if you don't know what it is, check it out. But essentially, you're doing more than one movement pattern. You're basically moving the entire body, or more than one muscle group at a time, or during one given repetition, right? So the more complex the movement, the more muscle recruitment you'll have. However, the more energy you're going to spend, the less repetitions you're going to be able to do, and the less isolation you're going to have on a given muscle. So with all these variables in training, it really depends on what your goals are. It's essentially exactly what matters. And essentially, this is what a trainer should use in order to figure out what style training routine you you should be working out with, right? Because whatever your goals are, that's what your training routine, your these variables, these are what these variables should mitigate. I'm not sure if that was the proper word. So anyway, yeah, that's a pretty basic gist, common concept of the variables that you can use in the training routine to affect the outcome of how you feel, how you look, how your body overall moves. So if that's understandable, you can probably pause this now. I'm just going to keep on going just so I can rattle off more info. I like to think that your training routine should directly affect or reflect the work that you do on the outside. So there's actually two ends of the spectrum here. Let's say you have a specific sport that you like to play, or that you have a specific physical job that you have to that you do on a daily basis. You have one of two outcomes that you can have as far as your training routine goes. You can either build a training program that directly opposes, completely builds up the opposite end of your body in the gym to reduce the risk for injury, right? Because out in the real world, out in the sport, out at the job site, there's more chance for injury because you're not focusing on your body, right? You're not as focused on the body as much as you are focused on the job itself or the sport itself. So when you go in the gym, you should already be sore from your daily routine, right? You even might have joint pain, you might have muscle soreness. A common concept for trainers would be to make a training routine that opposes what you're doing outside in the real world, so that you can make up for what you're not doing in the real world. That should make sense. The other half is to directly affect exactly what you do in the real world. Technically, the trainer should be doing both for the individual, right? You should be doing both variables. You should be doing what you're not doing on the outside of the gym, right? In the real world, you should be making sure that you're training what you're not training in the real world. And then you should also train more intensely, more focused, right, for the job that you have in the real world. So if you're a baseball player, you'd probably want to practice hitting a ball in the gym, or some style of, let's say, rotational movements to get that core activated. However, don't forget to change sides so that you're not one side dominant, right? So, yeah, that's a good one. It's a very, very, very key concept of going back, of training both sides, both areas in the gym. Let's say, that should be understandable to that extent. Another common variable, or not so common variable, that people often overlook is attitude, right? More importantly than anything else, essentially, if your attitude going into your training sucks, you can throw every principle and basic common concept away. With a poor attitude, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're still risking injury because you're just not focused on the workout itself. So, mentality, attitude, your focus matters in the gym first and foremost. Then you can bring in the science of rest, tempo, and frequency, and intensity, and and the reps and sets, right? Range of motion, all these things. So, 15 minutes, let's hope that's not too long for some of you. I'm going to go into a more visual concept for those that maybe enjoy seeing graphs. I think graphs would help this out a lot. I do have to make these, so be patient if you actually see this video and I don't have one posted as far as the principles of training go. But yeah, and then possibly I will go into a audio, visual, and kinesthetic form of learning, where we're actually in the gym showing you guys specific training routines to show you how to change the variables during training at any given time. So stay tuned, follow along, and hopefully you took something from this. Let me know questions, comments. And this is my worst part of the videos because I don't actually think anybody's watching. Please comment, question, anything you guys have for me. Yeah, let me know. And hey, pass it along because this one's actually informative. Lift expressively, folks.